Welcome. Thank you for coming out. My name is Darrel Miller, and I'm with two of my co-workers here. There you go. We've got names here. So uh, I, I've been at Microsoft for about 8 years now. I was a MVP in the Microsoft community before that, doing a whole bunch of other stuff. I've been in the API space for quite a long time, and we've been working on this product at Microsoft as a little bit of a labor of love for quite a while, and convincing our management that we absolutely need to keep working on it because it's a lot of value that we can bring to the larger community. And so technically, I guess I get the title of being architect on this thing, and Seb is our PM, so I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Thank you. So my name is Seb. I've been at Microsoft for the last 4 years now, mainly focusing on this thing we're going to show you today. Coming from the open source community, I've been a JS, DS dev for a long time. That makes Darrel cry every day with my JavaScript stuff. I am now the product manager behind some of that in all of our AI space that we're doing also. My team is responsible for all the Copilot extensibility pieces that we do on Microsoft. Have you ever heard of Copilot? Ever heard of AI in general? I don't know. Might show you a little bit of what we're thinking about in the AI space at the end, but so that's it. I used to be also Microsoft MVP. And if it's the first time for you that you're at Microsoft, I will ask you to if you have a Mac or an iPhone, you need to put them in your bags. We cannot have any Apple products in the premise. It's really important. No, I'm joking. Half of the PMs are actually running on Mac today at Microsoft. And you're gonna see today it's a very hopefully, or maybe not at the same time. Hopefully, it's a new face of Microsoft that you're gonna see today that is fully open source, fully community driven, and not Microsoft tech driven. That's really what we want to show you today. So that's me.
Thank you for the microphone. Hi everyone, I'm Vincent. I'm the main developer behind Kiota. Welcome aboard, and thank you for coming tonight. I guess that's it for me now, and I'll come back for the demonstration when we actually see code. You next?
Yeah, I think it's me next.
All right, let me go sit down. Enjoy it. Bye-bye.
Good time. Okay. So the three of us, this is going to be split into 3 parts. I'm going to talk about why did we go build another tool, which you could argue there's already SDK generators for REST APIs out there. So I'm going to talk about why. Seb's going to talk about what it is that we build, what the features are, what the capabilities are, and then Vincent will take us home with actually showing you how it all works together. So, why? First off, the question I ask a lot of people is like, how do you consume REST APIs? Because what I've found is it is actually fairly a religious topic, and everybody seems to fall really in one of 2 camps. It's the, give me an SDK, I don't want to have to learn, and I just want to be able to pull in a package. I want to use your SDK. I don't have to worry about serializing and deserializing and how all your auth system works. Just let me get on with my business. That's definitely one attitude we see, and this is why people who are building REST APIs, they have to go and start shipping SDKs out because some customers they don't want to use the API unless there is an SDK. And when I say SDK, it's such an overloaded term. I'm talking about a library whose primary role is just to provide a language-specific surface area to abstract away the HTTP calls. So you don't have to think about headers and query parameters and path parameters and serialization, deserialization. So that's one audience. The other audience is, I know how to make HTTP calls. I've done it before. I don't want to have to learn your SDK and how you think HTTP APIs should be projected. And I've had to go and learn 7 different ones, and everybody does it differently. Forget it. I know how to use OK HTTP or HTTP client or what's the Python one? Requests library. Like, there exists libraries in every language that help you do generic low-level HTTP requests. And some people, that's what they do. That's what they would prefer. There's actually an underlying message there in that they don't want to just have to go learn another thing. Why did we go and start building another this generator? Well, we're on the Microsoft Graph developer experience team. Microsoft Graph is a very large API at Microsoft that exposes all of the productivity data around Microsoft 365. So emails, SharePoint files, calendars, all of that API. It's massive. There's about 23,000 operations in this API. And we had a bunch of old legacy tooling that was really slowing us down. It was a real pain whenever we wanted to add new capabilities or features. We were using this old tooling that had been created years ago by another team. It wasn't supported, and it was just a mess. So we had to go find some other way of generating SDKs. And Microsoft has another tool called Authoriation that was developed by the Azure team, and so it made sense that we went and tried to use that tool. And we did some experiments using that tool. We ran into the challenge with our OpenAPI description for Microsoft Graph is about 60 megabytes in size. And initially the tooling, it's now bigger. 85. It's 85 for our beta API. Most tooling will fall over because most OpenAPI descriptions are not even close to that big. But it did kind of set us down a path of any tooling that we needed or we built had to be very high performance just to be able to manage the size of that description. The other problem we ran into is while Authoriation was originally conceived as a generator to work with any API, Microsoft has a habit of telling its developers to work on the things that really are the most important things to that particular team. And so what ended up happening is it was built by the Azure team, and there's a lot of Azureisms that leaked into it. And so when we came along and tried to use it for our Microsoft Graph API, which is a completely different set of APIs, we struggled because Microsoft Graph does things a little bit differently than the Azure APIs, because the Azure APIs are all about platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. We're all about software as a service, and there's just some different conventions. So we said, okay, let's try it. Let's go see if we can build something. And Vincent and I spent the time between Christmas and New Year one year when we didn't have enough vacation days, and we started putting this thing together. And we made a commitment to say, like, we are not going to build something with graph specific stuff. We're going to build it purely based on OpenAPI. And if we need to layer things that are specific to our API surface area, we will do that in another layer so that this can be used by anybody, because it's crazy that we keep rebuilding other stuff. We did look into other products out there. You may be familiar with a tool that is now called OpenAPI Generator, which was forked from Swagger CodeGen. Unfortunately, for political reasons, it is doesn't have a whole lot of support. And if you go try and use their repo, they've had a lot of contributors, but people will come in, they'll contribute to their particular language, solve their problem in their way, and there's no real consistency across the languages, and there's probably 3,000-4,000 open issues, and we've had feedback from other folks who are saying, like, they just really struggle to get support because it's really driven by a very small core of volunteers, and it's really hard to do this kind of work purely on a volunteer basis. And more recently, there's been a number of companies who've started doing CodeGen, but they're VC funded. Being recorded, but it's okay. We're waiting to see how long they last. It's a hard, VC money takes you so far, but it's hard business to be in because nobody wants to pay for these things, right? Paying for SDKs is a tough thing to do. So this is how Kiota was created, how it became our mandate to do things in a very agnostic way. And so we started building this thing to be able to support Microsoft Graph APIs. And as we developed tooling, we realized that really what developers wanted was just a really consistent experience. They didn't want to have to learn different ways for doing calling different APIs. And when people do a lot of work against Microsoft Graph, what they're doing is integration projects. They're going and getting some data out of our Microsoft Exchange or SharePoint, and they're integrating it with some other system. And so they're calling multiple APIs. And so now they need multiple SDKs, and they're different. And wouldn't it be nice if you could use the same tooling in one project, if you're calling 5 different APIs, to have the same consistent experience? And so as we started looking at this, we realized our customer is not really the API producer, even though that's why we initially created it. It's the API consumer. And I like to draw this analogy with products like Apple CarPlay, right? You go and you get a rental car and you sit down in the rental car and it's a car brand you've never used before, and they've got a navigation system and you're like, I don't know how to use this thing. I could probably figure it out, but it's just easier to plug my phone in and use the nav system that's on phone, assuming you have data package. And that is that experience that developers really like. They want to be able to go and talk to any API in a consistent way. In fact, that's why developers are saying, I want to just use a native library, right? Because they're familiar with it, they know how to do it. The problem is, like, hand-rolling native client code to call HTTP APIs. Yeah, sure, it's really easy if all you want to do is just make a simple HTTP call. But, oh, wait, we need retry handling. Oh, wait, we need auth. Oh, wait, there's a bunch of exception conditions. Okay, how are we going to deal with all of the serialization? Slowly, what ends up happening is those developers end up building their own sort of library. And they're basically building their own layer on top of that native library for their own set of conventions, which is great for that dev. But what about the next dev on the team? Well, or the next dev on the team, or the other team that has to then inherit that library. If we go through our code base in our org at Microsoft, I can find you 150 different wrappers around our client library because devs have come along and said, oh, I need to layer some extra stuff to do this on top, and everybody ends up re-rolling it itself. And it's not easy. So we strongly felt there is a demand for this high quality client code generator. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Oh. Let me use the arrow keys instead of swiping with my fingers. There we go. Now, if there is such a demand for this code gen, right, why hasn't somebody already done it, right? And I mentioned before, there's a bunch of VCs out there who are now funding it. And yeah, that's good. The problem is they are focused on the API producer because there's a market dynamic where API producers will pay for these things, but API consumers won't pay for it. And it is much easier to charge those API producers. And so if we want to get a completely consistent experience for API consumers, there's only 2 ways of really getting everybody a consistent experience. You can either convince everybody every API producer on the planet to all use the same library for generating their SDKs, or you can create a tool that the consumer can use so that that one consumer or that team of consumers can all use it for all of their APIs. And obviously the latter is a lot easier. And so this is the reason why we are so heavily focused on serving that API consumer. And in the process, we learned there's a bunch of other things around discovery and selection because you don't necessarily always want to be able to call an entire API. Nobody wants to call 23,000 endpoints on Microsoft Graph. So we have the ability for you to now be able to say, this is an API I want to call, but I only really care about these 2 or 3 endpoints. Just generate me the code for those endpoints. And so this is where our API consumer focus comes from. And with that, I will hand over to Seb to tell you more about the product. And hopefully that gives you an understanding of why we went and started down this journey.
Thank you, Darrel. Do that and hope that it works. So we're here. We found a market. We found a niche that we wanted to spend some time in. Now, what did we build? What is the product that we built and that we made fully open source? So first, we built a tool that is for API consumers and not for API producers. So think about when you're dealing with either your own internal API, who is building APIs? Who generates an open API from your API? Cool. Who is using a client code generator to generate code from that API? There you go. What are you using? NSWAG, because you're doing .NET. It's in the CI. Excellent. So those are good answers. Like we see these things happening. That's great to hear that you're building these things. We really believe in a world where, as a dev, every single API that I can generate from will always look the same. These two folks here have this experience today because they're using a tool that exists that will kind of generate you the same experience throughout all of the different APIs you want to use. But the thing is, not everybody's using that. And it becomes really hard. So when you integrate with a SaaS system, let's say you integrate with, I don't know, Salesforce. Well, you're going to have to ask Salesforce, so where is your open API file? Can I get a reference on that? Can I generate an SDK out of it? Oh no, we're not doing that. Go grab our SDK. So bring in, I don't know, a couple kilobytes or a couple megabytes into your project, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. And here, we really believe that producing these super large artifacts does not bring any value to anybody. And that's why we're kind of focusing on the consumer, because the consumer decides what they want to integrate with. But they also have the option to discover APIs. Think about you are in an organization and you have, like, at Microsoft is a good example. We have probably, I don't know, billions of APIs running around. How do you find an API that does the thing? Yes?
You would have a catalog where you publish all your APIs and their information and their URL.
Oh, you would think. We have plenty. We have plenty. As many API catalogs as we have APIs.
And Word documents.
And Word documents that, yeah. So we believe in a world where the consumer has access to these kind of catalogs. Where are the majority of the open API in the open source world? In GitHub. They're somewhere in GitHub. They're somewhere in some public-facing catalog. There's an API.guru that offers a list of curated open API that are validated, that are tested, and so on. So we give you the option as a tool to say, by the way, my API is probably not something I'm building. It's something that another provider has been building. It's probably out there in the public. So we can discover from this. Then afterwards, let's say you connect to, I don't know, I saw this week that there was the most used Postman collection was the brand new Google Maps API. Because who uses the Google Maps API? That's what I thought. So the Google Maps API is, there's like, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 different endpoints. You're not using the 70 endpoints. Maybe you are, because you're getting the entire package and you're generating all the artifacts from it, or you're generating the entire API surface, but you're never going to get to that code. That's just dead code that just sits around, that creates technical debt, that will need to get updated every couple months or weeks. So what we decided in Kiota is to put the power in the hands of the developer. When you see an API, we're going to show you the entire API tree. And you're going to be able to say, hey, I care about this, this, and this. Generate me a set of client libraries that represent that selection. So that way, as a developer, you're going to be able to have a first starting point, maybe 3 APIs, and later on, I'm going to add a 4th one. It's all code gen. So we'll just regenerate that. Nothing breaks in your code. Nothing changes in your code. You're calling the API. Now you have a 4th option to call into the API. So the selection for us is super important. And then generate. Now it's time for you to generate something. There's a couple of things we generate. We generate API clients. We call them API clients. Those are client libraries, SDKs, name it like you want to name it. We do that in C#. We're Microsoft. We have to do C#. We do that in Java. We do that in TypeScript. We do that in Python. We do that in PHP. We do that in Go. And Vincent, we do that in, I think that's it, 6? CLI. We generate a CLI experience for you. We're currently, the community is bringing on board Dart support.
Somewhat broken, somewhat working Ruby version.
Yeah, we have a little bit of Ruby, looking at Swift. We're really expanding the number of languages that we want to generate in a consistent experience. So for us, it's really important. So that's the first thing we generate. The second thing we generate mainly leads to SBOM, so software bills of material. That is around, when you work with a usually big organization, they're going to say, cool, you're using this API. Tell me which API. Because I need to unlock them in my firewall. Or I need to make sure you're using approved API that we have in our like super big governance document that is there. So what we do is we generate what we call an API manifest that represents the usage of your code based on the endpoints that you're calling. So that is something that is really interesting when you're dealing with big, large organizations. The last thing that we're generating is API plugins. API plugins are in the world of AI. That's what OpenAI started with, to be able to generate plugins that helps ChatGPT connect to an external system. So now we're not anymore just in the realm of developers. We're in the realm of systems that talks to other systems using a described language, which is OpenAPI, and the plugin system that lives on top of it. So that's what we're going to potentially show you at the end. We do support a complete OpenAPI 3.0 support. We're coming with 3.1 very shortly-ish. It's something that is on our backlog. We had a bug bash this week on the core library that does the OpenAPI 3.1, so we're happy to bring that to the table. And at some point, if Darrel wakes up and finally finishes the 4.0 spec of OpenAPI, we might get OpenAPI 4.0 support, which is called Moonwalk. So
nobody likes the name OpenAPI, and they still like calling it Swagger. So we said, okay, fine, we'll give you a nice name for 4.0.
Exactly. So at some point, you're going to have moonwalk.yaml walking around. It's very opinionated. What we're building is built on our opinions, and these two folks are very opinionated. And yes.
No, we're not.
And the reason why we're opinionated is because we want to be able to deliver an experience that is seamless across any API. So you cannot just rely on the way that the API is described with operation IDs. You're probably using operation IDs with NSWAG. No, we don't want that. What are people doing today when they're calling an API? They're putting an endpoint, they have the URL, and they call the URL. The URL is unique. It's really great because it's predictable. It's always going to be the same until it breaks, but it's always the same. So we do exactly the same thing. So the way we project code is all based on the path. So you're going to see a very fluent or request builder pattern that you're going to have the entire API surface available as part of it. It has massive community support. Red Hat is using Kiota to generate a vast majority of their API surface. So as a provider, because the interesting thing is, even though our market is the API consumer, providers are coming to us and they say, you're generating really cool stuff. So why wouldn't we use your tooling also to generate the entire surface of our API? So Red Hat is working really, really closely with us. All the SDKs of GitHub are now using, will be using Kiota. We have now Go and .NET.
And I think they started Java as well.
Yeah, so there's a couple of them that are currently in preview, but they want to shift. Why? Because as a producer, you would think that the Microsoft Graph team, the GitHub SDK team is like that amount of devs.
200.
Maybe 400, potentially 1,000, right? How many devs do you think there are in the graph, in the Microsoft Graph? 23,000 operations that changes every single day. There are new endpoints. How many devs? How many? 5? 7. At GitHub, how many? GitHub. Like the world runs on GitHub, right? 2. For all of their SDK, all their languages.
They also have an intern.
Oh, they have an intern now. That's great. So the thing is, all these and all these API producers, they're like, it's great, but I don't know if I can really invest that much money in generating SDKs because anyways, nobody really uses them. And then you realize that your NuGet package or your NPM package goes like to the roof. So we really believe that community support is super important, and they also understand that. And interestingly enough, new languages are currently coming from the community. So it's really interesting that we're working daily with folks from the community that are building new languages for Kiota. So what did we do? First, we get that OpenAPI description, either a V2 or V3, very soon V3.1, and very, very soon a V4. Yeah, as a YAML and JSON, we separate it. We just say, hey, there's a bunch of resources, relations, operations that are in there. Then we create what we call a code model or a code DOM, where we have our classes, our properties, our methods. We're really in memory. We create what a class looks like. Like we have all of that in memory. All of that is also created through code. We're not a templating engine where you can pass in a T4 template or an XSLT template or whatever type of templating engine you want to use. We do that all in code, all in C#. Then afterwards, all languages are very special. And we all like to be special with our favorite language. So we give the opportunity to devs that are building languages to refine, to respect some conventions. In JavaScript, you're gonna use camel casing. We're gonna use Pascal casing in C# and so on and so forth. You do that, and then in the end, we just spit out a bunch of code that you can use directly inside your project. Either you want to keep it, or you just want to generate it every single time as part of your CI/CD. It's up to you. Do we have an opinion? I'm going to leave that to us, but he has an opinion. It should not be in your code. Some others are preferring to see that. But in the end, we generate that in an idempotent way. So every single time you're going to generate, we're going to generate the exact same thing. So how is your app can interact with us? First, your application code. We don't have any business into that. You do you. You decide how you want to build your own app. Your app should call into what we like to call a service adapter, a facade to the rest of the generated code. So that way you're not directly calling into generated code for unit testing reasons, for many, many, many reasons you don't want to do straight into your code. So, and then the service adapter is tightly connected to what we generate. The code that we generate relies or depends on a set of abstractions. So our abstractions here, our Kiota abstractions, are the contract. They're the contract that the code will generate, will output. We will, if we do, generate also or code our own implementations for a lot of these abstractions, for HTTP handlers, for serialization, for the authentication, so on and so forth. If you don't like them, you can replace all of that. So literally, the real code that does the real thing, if you are like us, very opinionated, you're more than welcome to bring your own package along the way and replace our different pieces. Super important to make sure that we have a great community adoption, because in some organizations, for example, in the JavaScript world, Some will only say, I only do fetch. Some will say, no, never do fetch. You need to use Axios. No. It's like, well, come, bring it. Like, it even contributed back to us, contributed back to Kiota as a implementation of the Axios request adapter, the HTTP handler we have. So a good example of that is Red Hat redid our entire Java implementations, so it's more closely connected to their rules of using Java. Wait for Quarkus, right? And that's it. That's how you do things. So what is Kiota? It's really simple. It's a CLI experience. It's a CLI that runs in your terminal, where you can search, can download specific OpenAPIs from our public library, where you can generate clients. And that's where the most of the beast is. That's what Vincent will show. And there's a bunch of other things. You can log into GitHub, so that way you can also have access to your private repos to search for stuff from your GitHub, so they show up in the search experience in Kiota, which is a really, really cool capability. And so on and so forth. And here we have an RPC, which is warning experimental. And the reason why we have an RPC command or an RPC server is because we also have a VS Code extension that natively lives inside VS Code, where you can search, find, generate, regenerate, select, and very soon even be able to see documentation as part of that. So we will generate for each endpoint on demand. You will be able to generate an HTTP snippet out of everything, all the params, the body, the request, everything straight from this. So there was enough talking. I'd love to see some coding. So Vincent, you are up next. And I'm going to give you the mic. So I'm going to leave with this. I'm going to wish you good luck.
Thank you. All right. How's it going, everybody? Enough slides. Time for the fun stuff now. Where do I plug this thing?
Oui, absolument. C'est géré, c'est pas vrai. C'est géré. C'est géré, ça fait un query param actuellement. On va tout faire par des path parameters. Non, c'est juste que je trouve ça versionné, mais des fois, je sais que c'est versionné sur la SDKs. Ouais, non, c'est pas un problème. Comme il y a marqué, c'est Darrel. Ouais. Tant que l'information est dans la description de l'API, on est capable d'appeler. On va gérer. You're going to have to zoom in.
Yep. Is it big enough? All right, everyone. So tonight we're going to do TypeScript, but as Seb said earlier, we could be doing .NET, Python, PHP, Java, Go in production, and we could also be doing Ruby in non-production environments. And we have other languages coming down the pipeline. Just to get a sense of my audience, who knows or has seen TypeScript, JavaScript before? Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. You would be surprised. Sometimes I go to Python meetups and people have never seen Python before. Today, oh yeah, so we can see my pretty face. Awesome. So today, what are we going to build? Who has seen GitHub before? Okay, not bad so far, not bad. All right. So we have our wonderful PM, Sébastien, and he's mad at us because every time there are pull requests on a repository, they sit here idle and they don't do anything. and nobody goes to review them, merge them, and he doesn't get his beautiful features, and he cannot do the demo at the big conferences, and he's mad at us poor engineers, well, developers. And so one thing we're going to do today is to build an application that takes the pull requests from GitHub, using its REST API, of course, and then create tasks in To-Do. So if you have not seen To-Do before, it's okay. It's a task management system where you can create tasks and say that you've done the task, and it creates reminders and stuff like that, right? So one API, GitHub REST API, the other API, To-Do's REST API, and we'll discover that together tonight. I'm going to be doing the demonstration in VS Code. There is a cable here before I fall. In VS Code. And so when we talk about Kiota, we have two experiences today. One which is in VS Code, integrated in the UI, in the IDE directly, and another one, which is the first experience, which is in the CLI. Both run with the same engine under the hood, so you will get the same clients and the same experience, but it's just integrated in a different way, right? So I have here anti-Node.js application with some VS Code configuration files, some things for authentication for later, a bunch of npm packages, you know the drill, a couple of constants for later, and that's it. It's fairly empty. So the first thing that I'm going to do right now, because Seb told me, hey, I need the pull requests from GitHub into To-Do, I'm going to go ahead and in Kiota, try to see if I can find a description or something for GitHub. So let's go to Kiota, to the API Explorer. Let's say we want to search for an API description, and I'm going to type in GitHub. And if we were home, my internet is much faster than on the campus. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay, let me. Do I have internet? I don't have internet. That's going to be, for an API demonstration, that's going to be awesome. There you go.
Maybe GitHub is down.
It happened before. It happened before, not during a demo, but. Okay. This is amazing. Live demo, huh? Restart extension host. Let's see if that happens. It will cut your feed. I'll put it back on. So hold on. Let's try again. Search. Wow. I might have to restart the computer. That's going. Ah, there we go. Okay. Thank you. So yeah. So let's say we want to search for GitHub API, see if we can discover the API. Well, we can use the search function in the API Explorer to find an API description. Because I've prepared that ahead of time, I know that the public API description is this one that I want to use. So what Kiota is going to do is it's going to go on the internet, if we have internet, pull the API description for that, and display what we have available in terms of endpoints and operations. And this is freaking slow.
Even the GitHub API is about a 10 megabyte.
Right.
Which is a lot bigger than most, but still.
And apparently Microsoft still uses a 56K modem to get all of that, right? Let me just do that. All right. Thank you for your patience. Oh yeah, please ask as many questions as you want while I do it.
When you were searching, you were getting back some results with Mac based on the video. I'm not sure. Like the different versions of the.
Right. So when we're talking about the search fund feature, yeah, see, LTE works much better than the campus connection. Amazing. So yeah, when we search, we use public indices. One of them is apis.guru. It's a community-driven OpenAPI description. Like everybody contributes to that to put the API descriptions together. In the case of GitHub, they have multiple descriptions. One for the public GitHub that you access every day, but they also have a product called GitHub Enterprise Server, I think, that is a GitHub in a box that you can deploy in your IT. So they have descriptions for that. And this is versioned as well through time. So they have multiple versions of that to describe what APIs are available for each version of GitHub Enterprise Server effectively. They are also working on versioning their public API, but I don't know where they are with that. So you might see new versions show up there. The other way Kiota gets OpenAPI descriptions is through GitHub itself. If you create a public repository and you put your OpenAPI description there, and you add the right topic on your repository, Kiota will find it directly. So if you're an API producer, it's a very easy and cheap way for you to give the ability to your customers to generate clients and do other things through that mechanism as well. So Kiota relies on GitHub's search API to go get those API descriptions on public repositories as well.
But let's say I tag my GitHub repo as 1.0.1, and then I tag my once again at 1.0.2.
Right.
Is this considered in the search as
The search will only consider the main branch at this point. But we're happy to get feedback on any of that. If you want to have versioning somehow, you could also do versioning through directories, but not through branching or tags or whatnot, because it's the GitHub search API only indexes the main branch unless you force it into doing something else, but it doesn't like doing that, right? But thank you for the question. Any other questions so far? No? Okay, let's go back to the demo. So, all right, so Seb, as my wonderful PM, asked me, hey, can you go and list out the pull requests? So here we can see that we have a reflection of, let me make a bit of space here because this is zoomed out like crazy. So here we have all of what's available on the GitHub REST API. We have the applications, and we can get the list of applications. We even have the emojis, which we don't care about tonight. But I'm going to search for a pull request here. So let's see if we can do that like that. And you can see that through filtering, I can see that there are a couple of things that talk about pull request. There are things that are under commits. It's probably not what I want because I don't want to have to go through all the commits to get the list of pull requests, right? It will be taking time. But there are things that are just pulls here. And so under that, I have access to a get operation. So if you know HTTP a little bit, you will understand that get is usually to retrieve one thing or list a bunch of things. Post is usually to create new things. Put and patch to update existing things, and delete, well, to delete things if you need to. And so that looks like a good candidate for me tonight. So I'm gonna select this operation. And that's one thing that is really interesting with Kiota. You can see that GitHub has probably north of 500 operations in their API, but in my application, I only care about one. So why should I get an SDK or get a client that covers all the operations? If I only care about one thing, I should be able to create a client that only does the thing I care about, especially when we're talking about TypeScript, because TypeScript applications can be on the back end as a Node.js application, but they can also be on the front end as a front end application, which means all the code needs to go through the wire to get to your customer, and that impacts performance quite a bit, right? Good so far? No questions so far? Awesome. So once I've selected my operation here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate my client. And in this case, we're talking about code generation for clients, for API clients, but we also have new features coming along for Copilot and AI stuff, but we'll talk about that maybe later if we have time. And so for the client, for the main class, the main point of my client, I'm going to give you the name and call it GitHub client here. Then I'm going to give it a namespace name, which doesn't matter for TypeScript, but it matters for other languages like Java, like C#, and so on. Because Kiota doesn't want to mess up your project organization or doesn't want to force you to organize your project a specific way. So we ask you that information, so the code we generate fits naturally within your project. You don't need to change your project structure or settings or anything like that. You just need to tell us where do you want us to place the code and how it should fit within the code that already exists, right? Demo.github, like that. Then it will ask us, well, where do you want me physically to drop the code I want to generate. So I'm going to create a new folder under my current repository called GitHub here. There we go, select. And the last step is to select the language. So you'll see that for every language we support today, we also have what we call a maturity level. A stable means it's good for production. It will work for production. If something is broken, come to us, we'll help you fix it, and that's good to go. Experimental means it's probably broken, try at your own risks, don't ship that to production, and we're happy to get feedback, but understand that it will take time to complete the language and all the features and whatnot. And in between those two, there is preview, which is what we have for TypeScript currently, which means we think it's going to be good for production pretty soon, but there might be rough edges, so be careful just in case something goes wrong in terms of how we serialize the data, how we do all other sort of things, right? So tonight we're doing TypeScript. Yes?
How do you judge that? Is a preview experimental?
We have a list of features in terms of what we can generate. Can we do union types, intersection types? Can we do different serialization formats like JSON, text, form, multipart? Can we do authentication? Can we do some number of things? Yeah, and once we are feature complete, we have enough coverage in terms of tests, and we have been through bug bashes and through community previews and whatnot. We judge that the language is mature enough and stable enough that we can promote it effectively, right?
We have access, for example, during the preview to know what boxes it's ticking or not.
Yes, on our main GitHub page, you'll see there's a bunch of check marks all over the place. It doesn't cover everything, but it should give you a good idea of what's supported, what's not supported. We also have issues that track the things that are not supported. So if you type the language or filter on our repo on a per language label, you should get a list bigger or smaller of the things. But thank you for the questions. Anything else? No? Okay, so let's select TypeScript to generate the GitHub client. Yep, there you go. And so what it's going to do here is it will, thanks to the description and thanks to the settings I provided, it generated some code here that we can see here under GitHub with all the different things we're interested about. You know? Mainly the GitHub client and the other things. So let's try to play with that and see what it gives us. First and foremost, because we are doing JavaScript, let's add the usings and get that out of the way. Well, not the usings, but the imports. This is way too big. Huh? Is it still big enough if I do that? Yeah. Okay. Let me close that to make a bit of space. Let me comment out this one. We'll see. There we go. There we go. There we go. So we can start with that. And so when it asked me questions, the first thing I gave it an answer to is the name of a client. The client will be the main entry point to make all the calls on the API and all those other things. So let's try to create a client first. And as you can see, I've been doing dry runs, so Copilot already knows most of what I'm going to do. Create the client here. So to create the client in TypeScript, you use that static function. In other languages, you just new up the client. And it will ask you for something called a request adapter. It doesn't matter for now. We'll come back to that later. It doesn't matter, right? And this client that I have here is going to be the entry point for all the requests I'm making with the client. Here, if you see GitHub client, and then when I dot my way through, you'll see that I have auto-completion and a syntax that kind of represent the API surface that I just selected and all the operations I just selected. So under the client, under the root of the API, I have a sub-segment called repos. Well, that sounds interesting because I know that pull requests live within a repository, right? So let's go there, and then let's dot our way through. Well, if I want to get a repo, first I need to provide an owner information. So who is the organization or the person who owns that repository? In that case, I'm going to put a hard code my own repository name, my own GitHub handle. And then if I dot my way through again, I have a dot by repo. So it makes sense, right? The repos are under an owner organization, and then they have their own name. So I'm going to dot my way through again to give it a specific name. And you can see that I have all that nice syntax completion, right? You can see the square on the right that tells me from the GitHub documentation, from the OpenAPI description, hey, give it the repository name, we're expecting a string, and so on and so forth, right? So you get all that nice IntelliSense and all that help while you are writing the code, right? So here I'm going to use demo, and then I'm going to dot my way through again. Well, I have a segment now that is called .pulls. That sounds interesting because I'm looking for pull requests after all, right? And then after that, I have a segment called .get, which is the get operation in HTTP to actually list the pull requests here. And that's it. Just like that, in a couple of minutes, if you have internet, of course, because otherwise it doesn't work. I've been able to find an OpenAPI description. I've been able to explore the OpenAPI and the API surface to understand, okay, what are the different things available on this API? And then I've been able to generate a client and start mocking my code to understand, all right, if I want to write some code, what is it going to look like? Of course, this is not functional yet, but this is the first step. Any questions so far? Yes.
So if you go back to that GitHub folder that you created,
Yes.
and if you can see the content,
Yes.
the content is the models and the repos, and this one is the repos that you're referencing in the code.
Yes, exactly. So you have a very sharp eye. This repo segment here maps roughly to this repo directory. Under that, the by owner maps to item. This is a naming convention. The repo maps to item again, and then the pool segment here maps to the segment in the code, and so on and so forth. So it's easy for you to, if you want to see what the code looks like, for example, it's easy for you to navigate to those things and understand what's going on and debug it if you need to as well.
And I would expect that the models folder will
Exactly.
that are retrieved from that.
Yes.
Yeah.
The models come.
Error message.
Yeah, as well. We have error messages, so I don't know where they are exactly because GitHub has a large API, as we mentioned earlier. But yes, the models here contain every reusable model that is shared across multiple operations. So if you have a notion of a user, for example, or a pull request in that case, and you can get a pull request under this segment and that other segment and that other operation, it will, because it's reused and defined as is, it will be in this models directory. If it's a model that is only for a specific operation, it will be under the other ones here to avoid conflicts and duplication. But that's details. Yeah. Does that make sense? My answer, like, yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
Question, quand tu es dans le code comme ça, est-ce que tu as une possibilité en cliquant quelque part de revoir à quel endroit de l'aspect OpenAPI ça correspond, de retourner l'entrée exacte qui correspond?
That's a very good feedback here. So depending on what is in the spec, actually that's not the one I want to look at. Depending on not the one I want to look at, but depending on what's in the spec here, for example, if we go here, we might have it. Yes, see here you have a link to GitHub's documentation here right away. Yeah, but yeah, no, we don't have IntelliSense here that would bring you back to the description, but that could be an interesting feature for what?
We need a source map.
Yeah,
to map that.
yeah. It's we could it's. Yeah.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe si tu as une inconsistance? C'est-à-dire que tu génères quelque chose,
Mm-hmm.
mais l'API ne correspond pas à la réalité, donc tu as besoin de overrider. C'est facile à faire ou pas? Typique, si tu vas dans le GitHub, tu prends l'API hook,
Ouais.
webhook, tu vas dans l'organisation, tu dis dans mon gestion, tu commences ma liste de webhook.
Ouais.
Si tu n'en as pas, tu t'attends à une liste vide.
Ouais.
C'est pas ce qui fait, tu prends 404.
Ok.
Donc, du coup, comment tu gères ce cas-là où, par exemple, dans ton OpenAPI, tu es censé retrouver une liste vide, mais il ne le fait pas?
Ouais.
Tu envoies un 404.
C'est là que ça va être important que ton fournisseur de description ait une description d'API à peu près correcte qui représente ce qu'ils font effectivement. Et donc, dans le cas de GitHub, par exemple, quand ils ont commencé à travailler sur leur SDK en utilisant Kiota, ils se sont aperçus qu'il y avait plein de choses qui n'étaient pas alignées. Et ça leur a servi, la communauté leur a amené plein de feedback là-dessus en disant bah là tu vous dites que vous faites ça mais en fait vous faites pas ça, etc. etc. Et ils ont pu ramener ce feedback pour améliorer la description. Quoi. Pas forcément.
Dans le futur, on va augmenter avec un overlay. Et avec un overlay, c'est une nouvelle spécification du OpenAPI initiative pour faire des modifications ou
comme un plugin par-dessus.
Comme un patch.
Ouais, comme un patch.
Ok, ici, la description que j'ai reçue dans le monde du AI, souvent les descriptions sont pourries dans les OpenAPI, mais dans les AI, tout est basé sur la description pour qu'ils puissent raisonner sur comment. Fait qu'un overlay fait du sens, un overlay permettrait ça aussi.
Mais merci pour la question. Any other questions so far? English, French is fine. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So because we lost a bunch of time at the beginning with internet connectivity, in my demo script, usually I go through, oh, I didn't select the right thing. Let's select the right thing instead. And let's update the client. And you can do that on the fly just like that by just selecting different things and pressing play again.
Just go in Kiota and add a new endpoint.
Right.
To GitHub.
We
won't use it.
Yeah, if you want, I don't know, this thing. And let me see, like, so what we had selected earlier was this thing. So yeah, okay, that's a good point. Are you referring to is when the description gets updated, or you have not selected the right thing and you want to change your selection? Yeah, okay. Yep. 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 Okay. So instead of regenerating here, I'm going to explain something really important. Here, whenever you generate a client or multiple clients, we generate two things: a workspace.json that effectively tells us, hey, here's what clients you generated, and here are the settings you provided when you did that, like where is the description, what patterns, what path did you include, and operations did you include, and all those kind of things, and other settings like that. And we also generate a manifest here that tells us, based on what you selected, here's what we resolved. And so, and there's also a hash of a description here available. So if you change your selection, or if a description changes because we fixed a bunch of things in the description, now you can say to Kiota, update, and it will refresh your client on the fly to do those sort of things. Does that answer your question?
You have to explicitly say, I want to go get the new version of it.
Yes, you have to tell it, confirm like, yeah, I want the new thing, please refresh the thing. Because to your point, they can make changes in the description that are source breaking in the code. So you might not always want to get the latest description depending on what you're doing, right?
Une question aussi. Quand tu fais ton appel de get à la fin,
Yeah.
dans GitHub, souvent, dans le header, tu peux avoir ce qu'on appelle un content type qui permet de récupérer la ressource d'authentification particulière. Comment tu le fais là? Si par exemple, tu veux récupérer en V3+, ou V3, etc.
So
la possibilité de
there are two ways to do that. If you want to do that on a per operation base, like just for that operation, here the get takes, not like that, sorry. Here the get takes a couple of things, including a request configuration. So from there, you can configure additional query parameters that are code generated for you, additional request headers, and also options for the middleware handlers, and which is the second option. If you want to do it for more than just one operation, if you want to do it across the whole client, there is a bunch of middleware handlers for retry, redirect, compression, and other things like that we provide. But you can also implement your own middleware handler to say, hey, for everything you do with this client, please add this header or add this query parameter or do whatever else you want to do, right? So those are the two ways you can do that with a Kiota client. I'm never gonna get to the end of this demonstration. Yes, go ahead. Last question, and then I keep going on with the demo.
So by owner, by repo,
right?
You extract them from the URL itself, right? Of the get.
Yes. Yeah. All that is generated dynamically based on the URI template. Behind the scenes, we use something called URI templates, RFC 6570, and it's a way for us to say. I see, I learned. It's a way for us to say, here's a template for URI that takes a bunch of parameters. Here's a set of parameters, expand it in a consistent way. And so from that same template, we can also do what we do, which is segment the code and generate the code accordingly. So now we know in that template, which actually I could show you here. Yes, the URI, so hold on. The template looks like that. This is the template here. The template says, hey, the base URI, which is going to be api.github.com/repos /owner, we need to provide a value, /repo, we need to provide a value, /pools, and then it also accepts a bunch of query parameters if we wanted to provide those query parameters to your earlier point. And so this is how we generate the code. Based on the template, we know how to segment the code, and we know which things we absolutely need to ask you for example, the owner and the repo name. Yes, the by here is the Kiota convention for path parameters that are mandatory. There are other conventions we have through the code generation, but there are conventions here that we project when we generate the client. Let's go. All right, so let's do the same thing for Microsoft Graph and for To-Do. So I'm going to do that through the CLI this time. I'm going to do it really quick because we are at time already. But through the CLI, I have the ability to search for APIs like I just did in the UI. If we have internet, don't tell me you went back to Microsoft. Okay, so here using the search API, same thing, but for a CLI, it tells me, hey, you can, there are a couple of APIs that match to-do search term, things about Mastodon, which has nothing to do with what we want to do today, some kind of sample that somebody put out there, and Microsoft Graph. If I know that Microsoft To-Do is a Microsoft property, and I hear about an API called Microsoft Graph, well, there are chances that this is the API for that other thing, right? And so going a bit faster here through the CLI, I have this ability also to show what's on the API, and all of that is explained to you through tips, through hints here, if you want to learn how to do those things. But I can do that, and it will show me, hey, based on those filters, here is the client we are going to get, and here's what it's going to look like. So it's currently downloading our 65, 70 megs description to get the information about the service. And here it is. It will tell us, hey, on this API, you have a /me. Under that, you have to-do. Under the to-do, you have lists. Under the lists, you have the tasks. And here is how you handle to-do tasks and whatnot. And based on that, I have another hint here that tells me, hey, you can generate a client for that using this command. So I'm going to just cheat because you don't want to see me typing very slow here. But here's how I add a new client here. It's exactly the same thing I've done through VS Code, but instead doing it through the CLI. So I'm adding a new client for TypeScript, giving it a namespace, giving it an output directory, giving it a client name, targeting a specific description, and using a bunch of filters to filter down what I get from my client. And now you will see that here I have a new directory. Let me just collapse that, called Microsoft Graph. It's another client for a different API called Microsoft Graph. And we can do the same thing we've done just earlier. So let me just get this out of the way a little bit. Const, see, Graph client. So to Darrel's point, because we're generating with the same conventions all the time, now not only it's easier for you to learn and adopt all those conventions and have a consistent experience, but all the AI assistants, because they have the code in context and all the conventions, they get really good at suggesting, oh, here is what you want to do probably, and generate the code, right? There we go. So I'm creating my client for Microsoft Graph, and under that, well, I don't want to get me, but it's getting me started. So let me go do that here. And under me, so me is a shorthand in Microsoft Graph to map to the current user who is signed in. It's like if I did, well, I want the current user. Under that, I can get to-do, which is the product I'm looking for. Under that, I can get the lists. And under that, I can get the lists, all the lists. Yeah, the list of the tasks list, sorry. The idea is in to-do, you need to put tasks within lists so they are well organized. That's the idea behind the scenes. Once I have a list, I can do just grab the first one. Of course, don't do that in production. You want to check what is the list. Is it the right one I want based on the title, based on other things? But it's just for demo purposes. Dot value. There we go. And once I have a list ID, I can do almost that. Created task. Here I can do to do by by to-do task list ID. Here I have a task list ID and force the compiler to say I'm happy with that. And then I can list all the tasks under that. But tonight we don't want to list the tasks. We want to create tasks. So I can do exactly that instead. And there we go. Sorry, let me get there. So you get all the models with all the different fields and auto completion for that. Then when we want to implement the application and just get the pull request and create tasks from that, is just code mapping from one to another, right? It's just grabbing a bunch of information from GitHub's API and the models and the different fields and mapping them to do tasks. So again, because we're running out of time, I'm going to go pretty fast here with this snippet. So this is effectively doing exactly that. For each pull request that we grab from GitHub, we will automatically create a new task, like I've shown you earlier, using the Microsoft Graph client. And for that, we have all the different fields. I'm going to set up the title of the task to be the pull request title. I'm going to set the due date to be a week from now. I'm going to set the importance being high because it's Seb and he wants that to be done. You know, it's really important. I should not be working on other things. And lastly, I'm going to set a linked resource. So that's how to-do handles deep links. By doing that, the task will come automatically with a link in to-do, which if I click that, will open the GitHub application. It's a way to handle deep links. Specific to to-do, you don't need to remember all of that, but that's how it's done. And again, all of that is handled for me. I have a model, I have a Fluent API to create the request, I have the serialization and deserialization of everything, I have error handlings, I have retrial, compression, redirection. All of that is handled for me by that client, so I don't have to deal with that, and I can focus on what's important. Thank you for the segue. How much did we say for tonight again? Yes, so before we can run that code, both applications are authenticated, and so it's really important to provide authentication settings and sign in to secure all of that. And I don't know if you remember, but here I put nasty nulls here to just get on with the demonstration. So let's just set this up for GitHub. So here we have a first concept, which is an authentication provider. So Kiota clients can support any kind of authentication for you, job-bearer, authorization. They can support, I don't know, cookies and TLM, whatever, right? We provide an authentication provider for Azure Identity. So anything that, or what's related, Entra ID, I guess now is the name. Anything that is secured authentication-wise by Azure, we have a default authentication provider that I'm going to show you in a minute. If you want to authenticate with other things, you can use third-party libraries, implement this interface. I can show you that real quick. Yes, I want to go there, please. Implement this interface here, which is just one method to do the different things you need to do for the authentication, adding the bearer token and whatnot. And that's it, right? By building this authentication provider, you separate the configuration from the code that is running. Once you have that in place, you can pass that to the request adapter. So the request adapter is in charge of holding all the configuration for the client, authentication, how to translate the requests on the wire, how to deal with exceptions, how to do serialization and deserialization. It does all of that for you. It packages all the configuration for your client. And once you have that, so all of that is handcrafted. That's handcrafted code all the way here, and we provide default implementations for you. Once you have that, you pass it to the client here, which is where the generated code starts, and you can make a request and whatnot, right? So one part which is handcrafted, where you configure authentication, potentially the HTTP client you want to use, potentially the the serialization libraries and whatnot. And the second part is generated, and you craft it all together. Does that make sense? Yes. Yes, that's what's going to retrieve. It's going to use a device login flow. Sorry. Oh, it does both of those. Again, I'm trying to go fast, but I should not because it brings more questions. So, and so to do the same thing for Microsoft Graph here. Here, let me just do. Oh, I forgot to install the dependencies. Let's go to npm really fast.
So you have one for Kiota, you don't use the one from Levert.
Sorry, what's the? I'm not sure I understood the question here.
Normally, you're supposed to, when you call an SDK, you have the authentication provider. He tries to find in bars, he tries to find .on, you have a bunch of stuff that you.
Yeah, so Azure Identity, which is the library we're using to authenticate here. Like here, the device code credential here is one way to authenticate. It's one token provider. And it's built by our friends in Azure. And that's going to do device login. But you have other ones that are provided by Azure as well, that can use the environment credentials, that can use certificates, that can use on behalf flow, like all the different flows that are supported by Entra ID, Azure Identity, whatever you name it, are in the Azure Identity package. And we built on top of that an authentication provider, so you can plug the two together effectively. But if it supports Azure Identity, we support it effectively. Yeah.
What is powering the search of API? There is a model running behind, or it's just straight that query?
It's just, yeah, the first one on APIs Guru is tokenization, so it's really simple. The second one on GitHub using their GitHub search APIs, and it depends on what dark magic they do behind the scenes, right? So.
And pretty cool thing, nice thing to know is we're using a Kiota generated SDK inside Kiota to fill the middle of this method to actually get access to this site. So it's actually pretty cool.
And do we have the flexibility to include our own link to our, let's say we have the database of endpoints?
Today, the way I think you guys have a public GitHub repo or a private GitHub repo, you can do that in your own private GitHub repo. You can log in to GitHub and then you're gonna, the search of GitHub will actually bring the links from your internal GitHub repo. And we're looking at other ways that we can provide cataloging capabilities so you can connect to it. There are products on Microsoft that does that. There's API management, there's API center, there's a couple of them, but there's we're open to hear from you guys on what you think would be a good way to find that.
Well, exactly. I was about to talk about that. While Seb was chatting, I'm going to be forthcoming about that. TypeScript is still in preview. And this morning, while I prepped the demo, I found a bug in the generation, right? And so you can see that the models file is 33,000 lines, and most of that gets erased. 3,300 lines. Most of that gets erased at compile time because those are TypeScript stuff and documentation stuff and whatnot. But for a few edge cases, the code that was generated was incorrect and not building. And this is why I was saying to you, some things are in preview. Be careful with those. Don't use them in production. Test them thoroughly because there might be edge cases like those. So for the purpose of a demonstration, I did a bit of hand waving and fixed the 2 lines in the 3,300 that are failing effectively. In other languages, I don't have to do that. We've done this demo in .NET multiple times, Python, Java, I think we've done as well in so many other languages. Yeah, we've done Ruby as well. Without me, so yeah. So I haven't had to fix that. But we expect to fix those things before the language becomes stable, so you don't have to deal with those things.
One bit of one tiny API, one model that generates that.
Right.
It's just really
and to your point, it could be also related to the fact that your description is not the greatest in this space. All right, let's run the code because I know we're running out of time. So I'm going to F5 debug, and so we want to get to the output, I think, or the debug console. Yeah, the debug console. So I'm using device login because it's easier to demonstrate for a demonstration live during with an audience. But again, we could support any kind of authentication mechanism and any kind of authentication flow, whether it's a backend thing, a front-end thing, you name it, it's up to you. All of that could be can be supported here. So the first thing, it's trying to access GitHub's API, and because it's an authenticated API, it tells me, hey, before you can access that, please go to this page here and paste that code, and then say, yes, I want to do that, and I need to turn on my work profile here. Unpause. I'm going to say yes. because we are super secure, it's going to do MFA. Yes. There we go. So all of that is device login specifics and so on. Like depending on what you're doing, you might not have to go through that. So now it went through and talked to GitHub's API to retrieve the pull requests, and it's trying to create the tasks. So what's going to happen is it will prompt me just to do the same for Microsoft Identity instead. So I'm going to do just that. Go here, do the device login as well. Do we get MFA this time or not? We'll see. There we go. And now that I have signed in, it has access to Microsoft Graph API, which is the API behind To-Do. And it created 2 tasks here in my To-Do task list. And if we go back here, we'll see that now we have 2 tasks here. And they have a due date of next week. And they have the link I was telling you about and the title I was telling you about. Thank you. We're getting really close on time. How many slides do you have, Seb? None. Okay, awesome. 10 minutes for questions. If you still have questions after all the questions I got. Yes?
Comment vous gérez l'intermédiaire? Par exemple, j'ai un livre.
Talk to Darrel. He knows the hypermedia. Now, go ahead.
On gère un sous-livre ou les paginations, des choses comme
Yeah.
ça. Vous avez,
Pour la pagination, enfin, pour l'instant, on ne l'implémente pas. C'est-à-dire que le client que tu vas générer avec Kiota, ce qui va se passer, c'est que, parce qu'il y a plusieurs manières d'implémenter la pagination. Je peux t'envoyer un link en tant que header, je peux t'envoyer un lien dans la payload, enfin dans la réponse en JSON ou whatever. Là-dedans, c'est pas normalisé, donc il peut être root, il peut être dans plein de propriétés différentes. Et il y a sûrement d'autres façons que j'oublie qui sont possibles. Donc nous, ce qu'on a pris pour acquis, c'est qu'on ne va pas prendre de décision pour vous, parce que ça dépend de l'API. Donc aujourd'hui, tu as la capacité d'observer les headers qui reviennent si tu veux le faire. Je ne te l'ai pas montré, mais avec les options dont je te parlais tout à l'heure, tu peux faire ça. Et tu as aussi la capacité d'avoir la payload. Donc dépendamment de comment fonctionne ton API, tu peux aller chercher l'URL en question. Et ici, mettons que je vois paginer sur toutes les pull requests. Ici, j'ai un truc qui s'appelle With Your Eye here. Ici, tu vois. Et donc là-dedans, je peux dire, oublie tous les paramètres que je t'ai passés avant, juste pour le même format d'API, utilise ce lien-là directement, je connais ce lien-là, je suis sûr qu'il fonctionne, va utiliser ça, mais fais-moi la désérialisation pour moi automatiquement. Donc tu pourrais parfaitement faire une boucle ici et dire, ok, je vais chercher la première en allant passer des paramètres ici, qui va me rendre un lien vers la page suivante, et après, je vais chercher les autres pages en bâtissant le même type de requête pour avoir la désérialisation, la gestion des erreurs, tout qui fonctionne pareil, mais en passant à la place mon lien là-dedans. Donc tu peux faire ça aujourd'hui. On a pensé... on pourrait documenter ces informations dans la description OpenAPI et bâtir des extensions qui font la pagination automatiquement pour toi, mais on n'a pas eu de demande pour ça jusqu'à présent de tous nos clients. Ouais. C'est exactement ça que ça fait. Si je mets ça ici, si je mets fou ici, on s'en fout. J'ai exactement la même réponse qui va me faire la désérialisation, la gestion des erreurs, etc. Il te prend le lien que tu lui donnes. Ouais, c'est ça. Voilà. Donc, je pense que ça répond à ta question.
C'est comme ça que tu en donnes aussi l'intermédiaire, des step links sous une liste. Tu peux passer par ça.
Ouais, exactement.
Il y a aussi potentiellement un middleware qui pourrait être réutilisé, réinjecté pour chacune des requêtes. Soit à la requête ou pour l'ensemble du système.
Donc c'est bon, à toi.
From your example, you selected a very specific endpoint, right? If I have like an API that is so tiny that I really want everything.
Sure.
How does
select all?
Select all. I don't know if it's still open. Yeah, it's still open here. What you can do here, here actually, you have the single plus to get one thing. You have a plus in a box to get all the things if you want.
And then it can be back per area for the entire API.
Yeah. Here I selected everything under repo, but not the rest of the API, right? But you could select the whole API if you wanted to.
And we defaulted by default to none to bring the API consumer to be mindful of what they select, but it's a gesture you decide, and it's up to you.
Yeah, it's really up to you.
In tiny APIs, like I have 6 endpoints, and I'm going to use these 6 endpoints in my app, so that absolutely makes sense.
I think there was a question somewhere. Yeah.
When you were in VS Code and then generating the class, you showed that you generated
Yep.
And I was wondering if like online clients but also doing that.
Yes, so earlier when I showed that, let me just make some space here. We only had one client, the GitHub client here, that I generated from the UI. But here now that I've generated from the CLI as well, it also has the client I generated from the CLI. Again, like those are different experiences, the CLI and VS Code, but they all go to the same engine, which has the same rules in terms of code generation, in terms of, we call that a workspace. So the workspace keeps your what you've done in the past, and so you can update your client and do other things like that, right? All of that same logic applies between the CLI and the VS Code extension. It's the same engine under the hood. Any other questions? Was it interesting at least? Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
That is a good question. So there's multiple ways that we can see it. So from a downloads perspective, we're in the like millions in our NuGet packages. For C Sharp, we're in the 50 or 60,000.
So those are only the release. Let me just make it bigger. The releases on GitHub. That's the number of downloads of releases on GitHub. But that's not the only way you can get Kiota, to Seb's point. If you go to NuGet, we also have it as a .NET tool.
So there's two things. Like there's multiple ways that we can think about it. Either you think about the CLI, the experience that you're using to generate, or the number of dependencies are being downloaded because you have generated stuff with the CLI. So sometimes it's not. Sometimes your CI will be the one downloading, and you would be consuming these things here. So we're
What's the next on your roadmap?
In terms of what?
in terms of everything.
Features. We have a feature crew that works on different things on different languages at the time. So it's for example, we want to wrap up TypeScript and make it stable, and that requires a couple of features. We have community members working on Dart support. So hopefully soon you'll see an experimental / preview language for Dart showing up in Kiota. What else do we have?
There's a lot of improvements to the VS Code experience.
Yes.
In the extension for devs to really make it part of their daily workflow inside VS Code.
What about plugging this not in Git?
What?
If you want to search.
For the search engine. Oh yeah. So our friends at Red Hat, they developed something called API Curio, which is another platform to upload all your API descriptions and manage them and do all that kind of life cycle. And they have talked about implementing a Kiota search provider for API Curio. So you could say, hey, I have an API Curio instance somewhere. I want to connect to it, and then all your descriptions show up in Kiota, like I've just done for VS Code or for VCLI.
What will be the platforms you'd like to see?
There you go, PM.
Us searching from. Like, what is the type of systems you're using where you would dump your stuff in?
Like, do you have any API catalog today in your enterprise? No, one maybe.
It's
in progress.
What is going to be?
What is it going to be? Your API catalog.
Built? Yeah. Okay. So
why?
We have a platform for our devs, so they can, like everything they can reuse. We want to publish all those APIs for them. So I was thinking, like, if I can do a search, not only in GitHub, but like something specific, a data source.
So something we're thinking about is to make sure that we can come up with some sort of contract from an API standpoint that you could just bring in your API public, like or private, and then we can call it. Then you need to, like, there's a little bit of work that needs to be done from your side to bring that in, but it's already currently like you could bring your own.
So there's a new IETF standard called API Catalog.
Oh yeah, there's that.
And we're experimenting with API Catalog and the link set format, which is the recommended format to use with API Catalog. And we have some experimental work that we've been doing around being able to do semantic search of APIs, where we've taken API descriptions and created a vector database of all of those operations, so that you can actually search by operation, and you can use natural language searching. So you can say, and like some of the examples are great. It's like, find me an API that will tell me whether the Canucks won last night, and it finds the API that has all the hockey scores because it knows that Canucks are an NHL team. So that's something that I mean it's further down the road, but it is stuff that we are experimenting with.
But and we'd love to hear
another thing we forgot to mention. Sorry.
I thought you might be using Solo when you go on the first thing at the beginning. I thought like your search is backed up by Solo.
No, it's basically two APIs right now. It's GitHub and the
and
API group.
Magic Code.
And Magic, yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Surpris parce que c'est un monde sans fin, c'est-à-dire qu'en fait, moi, généralement, je vais utiliser l'API REST avec un fetch, et à un moment donné, je me dis c'est trop compliqué, leur domaine est trop compliqué, je ne vais pas l'utiliser, je vais prendre leur SDK. Le SDK, ce qu'il fait, c'est qu'il donne une abstraction, il me fait disparaître la technique pour faire apparaître le business. Et là, ce qui se passe, parce qu'on a un problème, là, ce qui se passe, c'est qu'en fait, votre générateur me ramène à la technique. Donc, c'est-à-dire que moi, j'aurais voulu, en générant un SDK, avoir quelque chose, par exemple, récupère-moi mes pull requests sur mon repo. C'est ce que je fais là. Donc, du coup, je ne peux pas avoir dans mon domaine, là, pas dans le concept de repository, qui est un slug et qui concerne une organisation, etc.
Oui.
Donc, en fait, ce qui se passe, c'est que je me retrouve en fait, avec un générateur qui me ramène à la technique. Donc là, ce qu'on voit, c'est l'URL, en fait. Qu'on manipule finalement, c'est l'authentication. Si on veut overrider, il faut que je manipule l'organisation HTTP, etc. Donc, c'est comme un espèce de wrapper sur finalement du HTTP. C'est un DSL sur du HTTP. Alors qu'en fait, moi, en tant que client, je voudrais quelque chose de vraiment business. Je veux retrouver tous mes pull requests sur mes repositories. Et donc, en fait, je me pose la question, par exemple, nous, dans le monde Java, on a Retrofit, qui est une API où, en fait, on définit vraiment exactement les concepts qu'on veut. On va juste mapper par l'inondation à quelle URL ça correspond. Ça permet d'avoir quelque chose qui est très business. Et donc, du coup, moi, je travaille sur une plateforme actuellement, là, une plateforme pour ma compagnie, puis on a le concept, le repository, c'est un concept qui est fort. La pull request, c'est un concept qui est fort, et on peut l'exprimer. Alors que là, en fait, ça nous ramène à la technicité. C'est ça qui est un peu. Je pense que le level, il faut le mettre au bon level.
Si tu te souviens de ce que Darrel a dit vraiment au début, pour nous, parce que tu parlais de repository, moi, ça me fait beaucoup penser au design pattern DDD. Et ça, c'est du code d'infrastructure. Et c'est pour ça que Darrel disait, mettez un adapteur au-dessus, peu importe le pattern que vous suivez, mais faites-en encapsuler ça dans un. Ça, c'est ton code d'infrastructure, donc c'est ton service là, c'est l'infrastructure, mets ton service entre les deux pour que tu puisses le moquer facilement, pour que tu puisses faire d'autres affaires ou l'injecter ou quoi que ce soit. Nous, on ne vient pas dire qu'on va remplacer tout ton code, on vient juste dire, pour la partie HTTP, on va te fournir une expérience consistante, robuste et rapide pour manipuler le HTTP, sans avoir à avoir des typos dans l'URL, parce que ça arrive, sans avoir à faire la serialisation, déserialisation de toi-même, tout ce qui est cross-cutting concern, retry, redirect, etc., c'est géré pour toi. Donc, comme ça, tu n'as pas à le gérer. Mais ça ne veut pas dire jette tout ton bagage d'architecture derrière. Non, ça, tu l'encapsules après comme un service d'infrastructure, quoi, grosso modo. Et ouais.
You would have no idea how many times people have come to us and said, oh, we don't like the style. Can we customize the style of the experience? And this is a very common pattern across a lot of the SDK generators. They have 1,001 options to be able to configure how somebody wants their official style of SDK. And while I get that makes sense for some people, it's not our goal. Our goal is to create this just very vanilla custom experience that maps exactly to HTTP, and then you wrap it and you put whatever is the most natural for your project, your guidelines, because we're never going to be able to build a reliable, high-quality generator that meets everybody's coding style guidelines, or we would end up, as Vincent likes to tell us, every time we try and add one option, he'll come back to us with, you realize this matrix of code paths that you've now created for me, and now I'm going to have to test these in all these different configuration options. So we're really cautious about adding new configuration options that are cosmetic in how the code is generated.
We want to keep it really simple because not only it's simpler for you to learn and use and whatnot. You get going super fast, but it's also super simple for us to maintain over time. Like, because if we don't keep that stringent gatekeeping in place, then you end up like OpenAPI generator that has 10,000 different templates for C#, but which one works? We don't know. Or you end up with is it Enswag, I think, which has something like 80 switches on the CLI.
Aujourd'hui, en Java 21, 17, t'as les records.
Ouais.
Donc toi, tu vas devoir définir une cible.
Ouais.
La cible, ça va être quoi? Donc ça veut dire que dans la configuration, tu peux cibler la sous-spécification, TypeScript, dans 6 mois, 1 an, il va y avoir des choses qui vont arriver.
Ben, nous, ce qu'on te dit, c'est que quand on va faire ces changements-là, voilà, on passe. Aujourd'hui, le Java qu'on génère est compatible Java 8. Aussi. Et demain, Java 8, normalement, il est supporté jusqu'en 2037, si je dis pas de bêtises. Donc, on devrait avoir de la marge. Mais demain, si on décide, on dit, OK, on veut plus Java 8 parce que plus personne n'utilise ça, on va cibler Java 17. Nous, ce qu'on va faire, c'est qu'on va faire une révision majeure de Kiota. On va dire, voilà, c'est un breaking change dans le code qu'on génère. On fait une révision majeure pour que toi, tu ne sois pas surpris, que tu dises, ah oui, non, là, il y a une révision majeure, il faut peut-être que je fasse attention à ce qui va se passer et qu'on puisse nous faire évoluer le produit et faire évoluer l'expérience et ce genre de choses-là. Aujourd'hui, on est toujours en V1. Ça fait quasiment 2 ans, on est toujours en V1. On commence à avoir une petite pile de issues où on se dit, il faudrait peut-être qu'on fasse une V2, mais on va y arriver tranquillement. Oui, dans nos Getting Started, là, on documente clairement, là, j'ai tout fermé, mais dans nos Getting Started, on te dit, la baseline, c'est ça. Pour Java, c'est Java 8 minimum, tu ne veux pas faire du Java 6 avec machin, etc. Pour TypeScript, ça va être du TypeScript 5, etc. On donne les baselines là-dessus. Ouais. Ouais.
Is it models that are returned? Predefined models?
Yeah.
Or
It's
so it's not a raw JSON.
No.
Yeah.
Here, full model.
Here you get a full model. I went fast on that because again, I was afraid of running out of time. But here we get the pull request simple. Like I didn't come up with this name. Like GitHub in their description gave it that name, right? And this thing has. Yeah, exactly. See how I'm navigating? Like it has.
This is what's generated.
Yes, exactly.
The other
Right. Last comment, and then we have to close because the security is going to come and kick us out. So
We have done a few clever things in the models. The two things I want to call out. One is you might have noticed in the configuration there's a thing called use backing store. And what that does is it uses an internal store for all the property values so that we can keep track of changes. So we do dirty tracking on the model.
Yep.
So if you retrieve something, make a change, and then you do a patch, we will only serialize the things that are changed when we write it up. The other thing that's interesting is we also notice we have a bunch of media types that are defined that we support. You can actually create different serializers for different media types. And so if you have an API that supports both JSON and XML, you can have one class, one model, and it will just serialize. I've actually done experiments where we've used CBOR, which is a compact binary object representation for binary payloads that maps to JSON. So you can basically flip a switch, and it's the same API experience, whether you're sending JSON over the wire or you're sending CBOR. And so that whole media type serialization is also decoupled and works with the exact same model. So if you want to send protobuf over the wire, in theory you could.
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you, folks.